Welcome one and all. Step right up and get your tickets for another moment in gaming history. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, or if you're new here, welcome officially to the channel. This is a series where I go into various different moments in video game history, and today I want to talk about something that we've all used and honestly don't think much about, but it's a key component for games for as long as many of us have been playing them. The humble D-pad. I know, it seems silly, but this thing hasn't always been around. When did it show up? Why did it show up? If you're in for it, pull up a chair and hang out a while as we go into the history of the humble D-pad. Those of you who know me already know what's going to happen. Those of you who don't, well, let's go back from before the D-pad and look at how we play games before we had something like it. Why, you ask? Well, in part to help put things in context, and well, how else am I going to entertain you for almost 5 minutes or so? Seriously though, to realize how big of a deal something like this is, well, to multiple industries, we have to look at a time before it was even a thing, like for example, computer space. This was one of the first arcade games ever created, and predates even the humble arcade stick. Considering it consisted of only forward thrust, missile, and orientation, the entire game was played using only 4 buttons. Fast forward from 1971 when this came out to 1977, and we have the release of the Atari 2600. This featured a much different control scheme, consistent with the control stick that gave the player control of 4 different directions and a single action button. This was a fairly big deal at the time, as it gave the player far more control and closer to what was becoming the standard arcade stick at the time. The next evolution would be in 1979 when Intellivision released its console. This came with 2 controllers that could be stored in the console itself, and featured the next closest thing to the D-pad we know today, in a small circular disc. This allowed for a much greater level of precision, allowing for a total of 16 points of control. The disc itself was recessed a bit into the controller itself, and was mostly a smooth disc with very little in the way of texture, which hurt some of the overall control, but was still very serviceable. It wouldn't be until 1982 that the D-pad we all know and love today would come into play. I know what you're thinking. What do you mean 1982? The NES didn't come out until 1985. And you'd be right, the NES didn't come out until then. But Nintendo had another line of games out before the Nintendo. In 1980, Nintendo would officially get into the handheld gaming market, releasing their very first electronic game system with Ball. Now this didn't use the D-pad as we know it, but it was the start of Nintendo experimenting with different control schemes that would work in a portable way and give players a large amount of precision. As the line was developed, they would go into various different button layouts until eventually in 1982 hit on something that would change how we play games forever with Donkey Kong. This game featured what we know of as the iconic D-pad, a simple cross-shaped design that allowed for 4-directional movement on a 2D plane. This design change came about primarily because Nintendo, and in particular Gunpei Yokoi and his team at Research and Development 1, were constantly looking for a better and more compact scheme to make their handhelds more convenient to carry. Something like an arcade stick or Atari solution was just too big and bulky for what they wanted to do. And I know what you're saying, how is this an advancement when Intellivision had 16 points of control already? The answer to this is simple: in its potential. Donkey Kong only used 4 directions, as it was a simple LCD screen game like a Tiger Electronics game of old. And as such, it had a major handicap in the fixed character animations. Each animation in these games would almost be like a cell that was pre-rendered for the most part, which means when you moved they would simply light up. Even the attack animations would have images that were pre-rendered on the device, which on most Tiger Electronic games you can see when you first boot up the game. This was the main limiter to the control scheme, not the D-pad itself. As we moved into the 8-bit era of games with the original Nintendo Entertainment System, players began to see the full potential of this control scheme, as it combined with the precision of the 4-directional arcade 2600 controller with the flexibility of Intellivision's circular design and a compromised 8-direction control scheme, which was more than enough for most 2D games. The raised design made it so the player could feel better where they were pressing in any different direction or combination of directions easily, and all under the command of their thumb. This became the standard of control, with pretty much every system of the 80s and most of the 90s using it as a primary control scheme, till it was slowly replaced in the 3D era by the analog control stick, which gave much more control and flexibility in those kinds of environments. However, even today, you would be hard-pressed to find a controller that doesn't have a D-pad on it. Furthermore, its usefulness is extended beyond the realm of games into things like car stereos, VCRs, and remote controls, just to name a few devices. All thanks to a small D-pad, put into a tiny handheld version of Donkey Kong. However, what do you guys think of this one? I'd ask if you ever used one, but let's be honest, you have. How important is a good D-pad for you on a controller? What's your favorite one? Let me know in the comments. However, for now, thank you so much for watching and spending part of your day with me. If I could ask one more favor, please leave this video a like. And if you haven't, consider subscribing. It really does help me out quite a lot. For now though, thank you once again, and until next time, happy gaming.